Welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. Um, so pleased that you all could join me today. Please hit that like, subscribe, um, share button, and feel free to comment. And today I'm talking about my ancestors who were free persons of color in and around Fredericksburg, Virginia. And the reason that I'm talking about them is, to let you all know that that area, in that region, they have what they call free persons of color. And there was a registry, uh, they call it the Free Negro Registry in Fredericksburg. And that's where I got a lot of my information from. Because Fredericksburg had a community of free persons of color. And my ancestors, Mary and Patty Bowden, who were indentured servants to George Washington, once they completed their indentures, they, they they were in Westmoreland County where they were born. But once they completed those indentures, they had to leave. And they did not allow you to stay in the same county once you complete the indenture. So they went to Fredericksburg. And there was a community of free persons of color in Fredericksburg, Virginia, even prior to the Revolutionary War, because my Charles Lewis, and Ambrose, my Lewis ancestors who were in the Revolutionary War out of Fredericksburg, were part of that free community that was not that far from, was a part of Spotsylvania County, except that Fredericksburg was its own county. Fredericksburg City, they called it Fredericksburg City and County. So it was, so Fredericksburg was, was the hub. But Mary and Patty Bowden were indentured servants to George Washington's family in Westmoreland County, Virginia. Mary was there for 40 years, from the time she was 7 until, she was like 47 years old. And she went there, I think she went there in 1737. She was 7 years old. She was born in 1730 to a Mary Monroe. And Mary Monroe was an indentured servant to the father of the grandfather of President James Monroe, William Monroe Senior, as was Mary's mother, Lydia Hillard. So Lydia Hillard was a white woman. She was a servant to the Monroes, to William Monroe Senior. And she was impregnated by a Negro man and had a child, Mary Monroe, in 1710. So after she had that child, and they found out she was mulatto, the church warden, who was Reverend Shropshire, it's hard to say his name, Shropshire, took control of the child. And he also had her whipped. She was whipped with a lash, had 15 lashes across her back for sleeping with a Negro man. And he took control of the child. However, William Monroe took him to court and said, Mary Monroe, Lydia Hillard, is my servant. Any child that she has belongs in my household. And he took him to court, and he won custody of Lydia Hillard's daughter, Mary Monroe. And the child, was raised in the Monroe household. And with, I'm like assuming that she was an extremely light-skinned woman because she got married to William Monroe Junior in 17, I think it had to be before 1730, like 1729, and she had a child. She had Mary Bowden by William Monroe Junior, and they just, the courts went crazy. They took her to court because they said that child's, you had a bastard child. How dare you? And she said that she thought she was married to William Monroe Junior, and they said you can't marry William Monroe Junior because he's a white man and you're a mulatto. So the marriage was void. However, they decided that she did not, she didn't know any better. And she was in a bad situation where nobody was explaining it to her. I don't know if William Monroe Junior knew, but the child was taken away from them and sent, that was Mary Bowden, my ancestor, was sent to live with these people called Chiltons, who I believe was related to the mother or the wife of William Monroe Senior, who would have been the mother of William Monroe Junior. So they sent the child to that house, and her name was changed to Mary Bowden. I have not been able to find out why they changed her name, but when she was 7 years old, the Washingtons got an indenture for her, and she had to serve 30 years as an indentured servant to George Washington's family, rather George Washington's father and brothers, or rather George Washington's half-brother, Augustine Washington Junior. That's who she was indentured to. Augustine Washington Senior was married to Jane Butler, and that was Augustine Junior and Lawrence Washington's mother. When she died, she left the property to her sons. She didn't leave Augustine anything. He must have really pissed her off. Anyway, but when Augustine married Mary Ball, they lived there. George Washington was born there, but by the time he was 3 years old, they had moved to their own place in Fredericksburg. So this is how, all this moving around and whatever was working. And Lawrence, the son, was left, Lawrence and Augustine Jr. were left to run George Washington birthplace. And so they, the slaves and the indentured servants there had been left to them as well. So they were, these young men, were well taken care of by the servants because they knew that the young men didn't know what they were doing. So the servants were like, hey, we got it good here. And they did the work they needed to do, kept it up real nice. And Mary Bowden, when she went there, she was 7. They got an indenture on her, Augustine Junior, and there's a cottage. So if you look on my second book, which is the revised edition of Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, there is a cottage. That is where Mary Bowden and the other indentured servants lived, in that cottage. And I'm guessing too that if there were other mulattoes on that plantation, they too were in the cottage, but it was women that lived mostly women that lived in the cottage. And so, there's also like where the slaves' quarters were, which was closer to, to the tobacco fields, to the fields. So it was a huge plantation. And when we went there, what we saw was that where Mary Bowden was, there was, it's a big room, tables and chairs, and they were cooking in the fireplace, a huge, open pit fireplace. They cooked there, and they said in the summertime they would go outside and cook. Um, but all the food, was cooked, through the open pit fireplace. And the tea, whatever teas they were making or anything like that were made. Everything was made there, you know. Um, so, so that's where Mary spent 40 years of her life. Well, she didn't really, because she kept running away, and you're supposed to, if you're a woman, do 30 years, but because of her frequent runaways, they put more time on her. And one of the times she ran away, she stayed gone a good 4 years. And they were like frantically not only looking for her, but any children that she had, because those children were to be indentured servants. But they did not find any. So, but Mary found her children after she completed her 40 years, and she went to Fredericksburg. At least one of her children was with her, Dominique Tapp. That was one of the children I believe she had when she ran away. And his name, actually, was Tapscott. So the Tapscotts are Wicomico Indians in Lancaster County, Virginia. And I'm inclined to believe that that's where when she left, somebody either took her there or she found her way there, and that is where she hid out. And they wanted to find out if she had any children, so they were going after, certain individuals, saying that those individuals were hiding their property. This is the Washingtons, looking for, more free labor, but they didn't find them. So most of the records that I found and what I'm talking about Mary Bowden and Patty Bowden, were in the archives of Westmoreland County, Virginia. And then Patty, Patty and Mary, when they completed their indentures, they went, to Fredericksburg, and there are records there. Fredericksburg, which was its own city and county back then, they had the Free Negro Registry. So the household where Patty and Mary lived in Westmoreland County, Virginia, was run by them and other, indentured servants. Patty was born around 1750 or 1752, and she was immediately indentured to Augustine Washington Junior, so that when Mary ran, she could not take Patty, because then they would accuse her of stealing. She could be beaten, she could be jailed, even killed if they found her with their property. They would hang a black person or a person of color for stealing a horse. And that child was considered, the same as any other animal or, chattel, whatever they own. If you did, if you stole or anything, they made up their own laws about what they were going to do. So Mary did not take Patty when she ran away. The last time she ran away and stayed gone 4 years and was brought back, she didn't take Patty. And Patty wound up being the personal servant of Elizabeth Washington Spotswood. They gave Patty to her when she got married. She married Augustine Alexander Spotswood, who was the governor of Virginia. So all these important people had slaves and indentured servants. And this is how, they were making, the rules. They were deciding, how you lived. You could not marry, if you were an indentured servant and you fell in love, they had to give you permission to marry. So Patty had children while she was indentured servant, and they would not give her permission to marry. The same way, I believe, with Mary. Although I do believe Mary got married when she ran away, because her son his name was Dominique Tapscott. So he had the last name of his father. But she would not tell them. They wanted to know if she had more children, and because that was their property, and she would not tell them. So I'm so proud of her, you know. But this is, you know, these are, you know, in like 1998, we held a celebration, a homecoming, you know, once I was able to trace my ancestors back to George Washington birthplace. They let us come there and have a ceremony, and on behalf of our ancestor Mary Bowden, who was an indentured servant there. And we also so we had the ceremony, and you know, a lot of people came, and it was really nice and everything. But you know, it's just frustrating because you're finding out bits and pieces, and when you want to sit down and talk to these people about what you're finding, not because it's no privilege to me to be related to these people. It's no privilege. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm saying what I found in the records. Who are they that I should be, you know, oh, I'm so grateful. The Monroe document, I'm related to him. Well, we're related also to George Washington through his mother, Mildred Warner Washington. Oh, yeah. To his grandmother, Mildred Warner Washington. Yes, we're related. We're all, you know, when I joined the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, in 1998, and they said to my face, oh, you are one of Washington's mulattoes. So they knew, you know, and it's they didn't want us talking about it. They certainly didn't want me writing books about it. But I want to do it because I want my folks to know, us to know, our indigenous roots, that our roots are here. We're indigenous to this country. We're not visitors. My ancestors, except for one that I've traced back, were not brought here as slaves. And shame on them. They're the ones that brought the slaves. Why should we be embarrassed about talking about who our ancestors are? Why should we be embarrassed? We were the ones who were victimized, not them. Yes, so I talked about it. I wrote a book, 7 books about it, because I want my children to know, if you have that knowledge, they can't re-enslave you again. That's why Trump is trying to roll back time, talk about make America great again, trying to take us back to a time when we had no rights, we had no freedom. You know, why in the world would we want to go back to them times? Besides, those times he's talking about taking us back to, them people was over there living in a cave somewhere in Germany. So why is he here in my country trying to roll back the time to when him and his felt comfortable? Okay? So let's get real here. I'm talking about my history. That this was a history that was here when I was born, that I was born into, not that I created. And yes, I talk about it. I'm talking about all of it. Why should why should we, the people that were exploited, not have a history? And by that I mean the native people and the people who were slaves, who were enslaved and brought here. Why should we be ashamed of who we are? We are not the perpetrators. They are the perpetrators. They perpetrated a fraud on us. They perpetrated a fraud by using the Bible, an African spiritual texts, African spiritual texts, to make themselves God's chosen people. I'm not talking about those European Jews over there in Israel. I'm talking about white folks are the ones who treat themselves like they're God's chosen people. Why would God tell you to go and slaughter men, women, and children? What God do you worship? What God tells you that you have a right to go into the indigenous people's lands, kill them off, and steal their wealth? What God are you worshiping? Because it's not the God that we worship. It's not our God. So you need to, we need to be able to talk freely. They don't want us to talk about history. And if they don't want us to, there must be something in history for us, because they don't ever want us talking about or believing in anything that lifts us up. And every time we have knowledge and wisdom, we are closer to Creator. They don't want that, because they want us to look at them like they are some kind of gods, like they have some kind of divine, divine excuse for what they do. Oh, we're doing that. We're killing you. We're raping, robbing, and stealing from you in the name of God. This is a Christian nation. Nothing that they have done in this nation spells Christian to me. Okay? So, but, when I was looking for records, I had to go to the churches and look at their records too, because they were the first ones who were the wardens. The warden? The church had wardens who would go out and charge people with crimes. Yeah. They were charging, those are, like when they had the witch trials and stuff, and they'd be showing you white women, they were killing us too. They were killing women of color. If they thought she's a witch. She's a witch. But they don't want you to say that they're devils, that they're Satan, that their actions are evil. But they will point the finger and call somebody a witch. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, so, yes, I'm going to close. And if you have, again, like I said, hit that like, share, hit the subscribe button, and please comment and feel free to ask questions. I do have a lot of documents that to connect, to help with the story about Mary and Patty Bowden. But most of their story is in the book, Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, especially in the second edition, where I wrote extensively about them. And that book is available, through Amazon, through Barnes and Noble, and if you want a signed copy, it's available through me. To those who donate $50 or more, I will sign and send you a copy of one of my 7 books. I'm trying to push 3 of them, which is the revised edition of Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, Along the Rappahannock, and I think it's Minkwa, Nami, and Okehokee. But if you donate $50 or more, I will, sign a copy of any of the books that I've written. I've written 7, and get it to you. You can donate through my Cash App, which is $Wills920, Venmo at Anita, ANITA Wills-4. Or if you want to do it another way, then contact me. And I will, we can arrange something else. But I'm closing, and I'm so pleased that you all were, that you all have tuned in, that you all are supporting me. We're growing. We're pretty soon we're going to have perks to offer everyone. And thank you, and have a wonderful weekend. It's going to be okay. Bye.